Hi everyone, this is Danielle Stedman and I am the host of Dogman Diaries. I'd like to thank you all for joining me tonight, and I'd like to introduce everyone to my guest, Mr. Dave Parker. Dave, are you there?
Yes.
Hi Dave, how are you?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Well, Dave, you are going to be the first guest I have on for my Bigfoot segment, which I will be doing twice a month, maybe more, depends on how it goes. And I'm really excited for this interview because you have lots of fantastic information for us. But first, I would like for you to just tell everybody who you are, where you're from. Just give us a brief background.
Okay, well, I grew up in and around the town of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. When I was younger, I lived in town. I got a little bit older and liked country life. Plus, I had too many toys and junk to live in town anymore, so I got me a acreage and lived there for several years, fixed the place up. Ended up lived there for about 8 years, for twice what I paid for it. Came to Missouri, which when I was a kid, I came here with my dad to visit his Navy buddy, and I just kind of fell in love with the way it was here and decided someday I'd end up here. Well, here I am. Got here in 2008, bought a 10-acre property, and it was pretty, it wasn't brand new or fancy or nothing, but having been a handyman, didn't bother me. I'm used to swinging a hammer and painting and fixing up stuff, so I didn't think nothing of it. Found me a place with a nice house, with a decent house and good big barn, a pond on the property. I mean, lots of woods, good hunting, not too many close neighbors. Perfect. And I moved here with my daughter, and we lived here for a few years, and then she got older, and now she's grown and off on her own. But really, we had Bigfoot here, but I didn't really know it at first. It wasn't until after my daughter had moved away that I had a sighting. I mean, there have been some weird things that you just really couldn't explain, and after I seen one, it all made sense. So I got a bunch of woods. I burn wood in winter. I figure why waste the dead trees, and it saves money. So I'd been out wood cutting one day, and I had a whole bunch of wood cut up, and the following day I went out, I was going to load up the truck and bring it up to the house, put it in the basement. So I have wood. I'm going to turn around on the top of the hill so I can get my truck parked as close as I can to where the wood was. I see a figure standing there. It was, like a flat black bird. Looked like a silhouette. I only seen it for a couple of seconds, and from the shape of it, it had to have been a female. What I saw looked to be about man-sized, and it kind of reminded me more than anything, just look close to a human shape, strip out all the numbers, lines, and it was a shape about like that. And I seen it, and I looked away for a second. When I looked back, it was gone. I couldn't make out any facial features because I think I was looking at the back of it. You know, and I'm like, no way. And I'll tell you what, when I took to load up the wood, and I sure looked over my shoulder an awful lot because it was only about 100 feet away from where I'd seen this. And I only loaded about half the wood I was going to take, but and then I decided to go up to the house. Well, 2 days later, I went back to the very spot, and I thought I'd see if there were any tracks. But unfortunately, the way the forest floor is, there was a heavy leaf cover, so if there were any tracks, it kind of like a sponge, it bounces back over time. I didn't find any tracks, but what I did find is the slope of the hill was a little bit more, and what I thought was about 6 foot high was actually more like about 8 to 8.5 feet tall. And I thought, okay. And then I reported it to the game warden, and I said, I've seen a Bigfoot. What do you do about it? Well, there's no law to protect him. He goes, I suggest you, again, just shoot it in the face. And I said, what is wrong with you? I said, I don't want to hurt it. So it wasn't doing nothing, wasn't bothering me or threatening me or nothing. Why would you want to shoot one? Well, there's no laws to protect them. And I thought, well, that's a dead end. So I went around and I called a couple places to report it. And I ended up calling a group out in California. That's the one that Dave Pilates is with. And I met a guy there named Richard. And he became a mentor to me because, you know, living with him, it's like, okay, I've seen one. Is there more? I don't know. So anyway, I was down near that area probably, I'm guessing it was about a week later. You get an old place, you get a lot of old junk. And there was an area where there had been a lot of just trash and old wood and just a fire hazard area. So I took a 55-gallon barrel down there and decided, well, at least if I burn up all the burnables, it'll reduce the mess. They're burning. And cutting up briars and stuffing them in there, too. All of a sudden, I hear 6 wood knocks up towards the top of the hill off to the west of me. Then you can hear something big moving closer. I couldn't see it, but you could hear it. You could tell it wasn't any deer. And it settled in behind a clump of oak trees, probably somewhere between 75 and 100 feet away. And I thought, okay. And I tried to talk to it. I said, it's okay. You don't have to hide. I won't hurt you. And it stayed there, and I figured it was pretty curious because I started reading up on them, and they call them watchers and everything else, and it seems that they are pretty curious. So I go on burning. Pretty soon, I don't know if it was a pebble or an acorn or something, but something comes zinging over about 20, 25 feet away and hits in the junk, and you hear it. I kind of laughed. And I just pretended like it didn't happen. I said, you don't have to hide from me. And I kept on doing it. Pretty soon, another one come, hit on a piece of tin. It was all good. But then, off to the northeast, I could hear something moving along the creek. Sounded like a drunken blind elephant because there were lots of branches and stuff getting broken. I'm thinking, well, I got one of them here that's maybe 100 feet away, and I got another one coming real slow down the creek from the other direction. And it's like I got one on each side of me, and then I thought about how, for example, like chimpanzees, when they meet a rival group, will be breaking branches and other stuff as a form of intimidation. And I thought, okay, I can push it. I guess guess this is a good time to jump in the truck and head up to the house and have a cold drink. It was not one of my more brave moments, but I thought I might push. So I went up to the house, had a cold drink, and that was my second encounter. Didn't see one, but there were definitely two of them there. So now I know there's at least two of them. Don't know how many more, but at that point, it's just kind of doing a little bit of learning. And anyway, then it was probably a week after that I had let my dogs out. It was probably about 12:30 at night, and I've got two dogs. One's like a beagle mix, and the other's a coon hound mix. The bigger one heard something and started barking and jumped the fence and off into the night he went. So I brought the little one in, and here about 20 minutes later, Boomer had returned, and he was standing up looking in through the door, through the glass in the door. So I let him in, and he smelled terrible. Oh, he reeked. He had this smell on him where about the only way you can really describe it is like that musky smell of a sweaty horse, and then there was like a burnt fireworks smell, that sulfury, like burnt smoke balls, and with a skunk undertone. And it was just pretty much like on his head and back. And I thought, oh, jeez. Well, I really wasn't wanting to give the dog baths that time of night, but since he's the one that likes to sleep in my bed, I didn't have much choice in the matter.
Right.
So give him a bath, and it all washed off. So what I figured out is there had been a Bigfoot close to the house, and he heard it and jumped the fence and went out there. And I mean, he's a real nice dog, likes people, loves children. And I figured they could have killed him, but instead they loved on. And it was at that point I thought, well, they loved on my dog instead of making a meal out of him, so maybe we can learn to live together, live in peace.
Okay, one moment. I don't mean to interrupt you. So, you mean to tell me that your Bigfoot, or feet, or I don't even know how to call them, when you have multiple, but your Sasquatch there, where you live, so they don't look at your animals as meals?
No.
Wow. Amazing. Because, I mean, like I told you, I know very little about Bigfoot. That's why I'm doing this. So, I've always heard that when they're around, you need to really watch your pets because they sometimes do make meals out of them.
Well, when I talk to Richard and stuff, a lot of times if you got an aggressive dog that's going to want to attack them, sure, they'll kill it. Or possibly if you've got one that's a loner and it's not in the best of health, they're going to take a meal of opportunity. But I think with my dog, since he was friendly, they were friendly to him. But I had also later come to discover that the one young one had made friends with my dogs. And they don't bark at him. They're familiar with him.
Now, can you tell everybody, you had told me, I know you have given them names. Can you tell everybody their names?
Oh, I don't have names for all of them,
but the ones you do.
Like the one, I call him Little Andy because I had this group of researchers. I had some of them come down from the Minneapolis area, and they're with the SRA, and the one guy, his name is Andy Peeper. Well, this young Bigfoot male, who's every bit as curious as a ferret and peeks in the windows and stuff, since he likes to peep in the windows, I call him Little Andy, after Andy Peeper. And he thought that was kind of neat. But so I named him Little Andy. He gets kind of bold sometimes. He's the one that I have probably the most up-close encounters with. I've had it, well, within 15 feet of me, I don't know how many times. Because a lot of times I'd be on my back deck. And the way my house is, the garage comes off at basement level, comes off like the kitchen. And my deck does too. And my deck isn't very big. It's only about 10 by 10. But the deck itself lines up about with the bottom edge of the roof of the garage. So then you got about another 15 feet to the end of the garage. Well, there were many times where, I decided to reach out to the Bigfoot family. And, you got them around, it's a mystery. How many of them are there? What are their habits? Can I make friends with them? I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. So you kind of get in the mindset of thinking, well, what if you were to go to an alien planet or something and wanted to try and make friends with the indigenous population? What would you do? You can't speak their language. So I'd put out a snack for them, and I'd holler out into the woods for them. And they figured that out right away, because I used to have a goat, and brought him from South Dakota. He was a bottle baby. He was our first, so when he eventually got old and died, but I used to feed him, and when I'd feed him, I'd yell out, "Are you hungry?" He'd come running, and he'd get fed. Well, they were watching the woods, so I'm sure that they could figure that out. So I'd go down to where I had the burn barrel going, and there was a big oak tree, the log off it, that was laying there. It'd been there for several years, I'm sure. But I'd set a little container with a snack for them. Not nothing that they're going to become dependent on, but just a little treat. And I'd put some dog food in it, and maybe some leftovers, throw a couple raw eggs in there in the shelf. And that's one thing that I did learn. And then what I would do is I'd hit in the burn barrel, and I would call out into the hollows different directions, "Are you hungry?" And hit on the burn barrel a few times, and it made a heck of a lot of noise. And then I'd walk away, or if I took the pickup down there, I'd jump in the truck and drive back up to the house. And it seemed like something always got it. It wasn't always them. Sometimes a critter would get into it. And by putting the eggs in there, you'd be able to tell. Because if the Bigfoot were to get into it, you'd never find eggshells. I don't know if they pop the whole egg in their mouth, or if they take it away and eat it later, or what. But whenever they take it, you wouldn't find any eggshells. But if a little varmint got into it, they're going to eat it right there. So then you'd find eggshells. So when I did find eggshells, I'd pick them up and get rid of them, so you can tell. But that was one thing that I learned right on, that that's a way to tell who got the food. Because sometimes where I'm living, there's a lot of wildlife. There's a lot of raccoons and possums and skunks, and any of that could have got into it. But I wanted to make sure that the Bigfoot were getting it. So that's one thing I figured out to be able to tell. Anyway, as time went on, I would get out on my deck and after dark, and I would hear what sounded like far too many owls in an owl territory. After doing a lot of reading, various Indian tribes have called the female Bigfoot the Owl Woman. And it's because of the calls they make. They do an imitation of a barred owl, but each one of them does different variation. Like sometimes one will do a single hoo, others you get the hoo 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 hoo. But each one does a different variation. So I figure if they were all birds, they'd all probably sing the same song. But I figured out that way it lets them know who is who without a direct, and where without direct line of sight. Which shows just how smart they are, because they're going to do a sound that blends in, that's not going to draw attention. But, you know, when you start hearing 5 owls in a bird's territory, and there's no fighting, it's off. Because owls, just like any other birds, they're going to carve out a territory. They're going to run rivals out because they need a certain area that's going to support their family. When you get a whole bunch of them, that's probably a pretty good sign that they're not owls. Anyway, after doing this for a while, I'd go out and make calls back and forth to them. The SRA guys had come a couple times. But before they came, I had an investigator come. These guys are ex-BFRO, but they didn't like the way the BFRO run things, so they made their own group. But they still had a lot of connections with some of those people. And since it was so far, they were going to have an investigator do them a favor from the BFRO. He come here. Well, he come here, and I told my story and showed him where stuff happened, and showed him different things that I had noticed, like trees twisted off weird, and tree arches along trails, and stuff like that. And we'd done a few calls and whatnot, and we just weren't getting any action. So we jumped my truck and went down the roadways, tried a couple other places, and didn't seem to have much happening. And we got back up to the house, and then I started to hear the familiar owl calls of the female Bigfoots here. And I don't know, the guy gets in his car and he drives away, and I'm like, "Oh, that's them. They're coming this way. What are you doing?" You know, I figure if he was going to do an investigation, I would have expected him to want to do more than an interview and maybe, spend the night and the next day go out and check out some different areas where you hear activity. That's kind of what I was expecting, but wasn't what I got. But that's all right. These guys from the SRA, they're great, and they came down, and we had a good time, and they went around, found all kinds of stuff, and Chris, I'll give that man credit. He went through a lot, and I told him, I said, "You got to watch out for the locust trees." Well, he wasn't watching good enough, and got a thorn went right through his boot and into his foot.
Oh.
He had to break that off.
Oh, that hurt.
And he still has a thorn in his boot to this day. But
ouch.
But you ever seen those black locust trees?
I've seen them, but thankfully here in North Carolina, we do not have them.
Oh, they're terrible. They've got thorns as long as my finger with a sidebar on them and stuff. There's trees around here that trunk's about 18 inches across, but you and I putting our arms together couldn't reach around it because they're just so covered with thorns. And that locust, you split the wood like to burn it for firewood, and it's even got thorns inside the log. This is crazy. I generally cut them down as fast as I find them on my property. I got a recorder, and I try to record the sounds that they make and the different calls, but you really have a heck of a time trying to get anything good. A lot of times you'll hear something, then you get the recorder, and then they don't do anything. Or you've got all kinds of different things that create problems, like when it's cold out, your batteries go dead right away. Or wind will mess you up, and if it isn't that, it's you get the neighbor dogs all carrying on, or cattle, or you get to be around August, you get those cicada things doing their wee, 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 which all add hard on trying to get a decent recording. Or we get those whippoorwills around here, and if you get a whole bunch of them around, they're all going nuts whippoorwilling all night long. And It's just 100 different things. If it isn't that, you get an airplane flying overhead, or traffic, or something. And it's just really hard to come up with any decent kind of a recording. If it isn't that, it'll be my cat doing something stupid, meowing. It's always something. I get really frustrated sometimes.
Well, you do have several recordings you have shared with me that I'm going to put up so people can listen to them. And if you want to, do you want to go through these recordings and just kind of tell us what are on them that we're going to be listening to?
Well, most of them have dates on them, so depending on what the date is, it depends on what happened. And since I'm not seeing the dates in front of me right now, it's kind of hard to say what they are.
Well, let's start with the one where you believe the baby was born.
Okay, that would have been, I think, April 20th. That was down by my pond. I heard the girls carrying on quite a bit, and I just set the recorder on the rail of the deck and just let it go. I come out and checked on it, and it was about a 45-minute recording, and then they started moving off. But when I listened to it, I believe that I just missed the birth of a baby down by the pond. Now, I understand that when they have a baby, they'll do it near a pond or some water where they wash it off. And anyway, to me, the behavior sounds just like so many women I know, all fussing over a brand new baby. It's like, oh, there's a new baby, oh. And you know how women all get together? And sounds like a hen house with them. They're all fussing over the new baby. Well, I listened to that recording, and the behavior is the same. They're not so different. You could hear the male sentries nervously walk around the edge of the forest because they were probably nervous because the girls were, I've never ever heard them that vocal before or since. I've done a lot of different stuff, but never like that. And they were all wound up and excited over something. And there were some cries in there that I believe was a newborn baby. And a lot of the time, the big, I guess what you'd call the alpha female, the big mother of the bunch, she would try and make her calls drown out the crying of the baby. But you hear these owl-like calls that sound like owl and chimpanzee and crow all mixed into one. And it's just crazy. But they did that for about 45 minutes, and then they moved and headed off north towards the creek, and then they followed the creek west of here somewhere. Because from where my place is, I believe their main camp, where they all hang out and sleep, is probably about a half a mile southeast of me. But they come follow the creek, and usually around dark, they come by my place, and then they end up heading off west, following the creek off to who knows where. And then usually about 3:30 in the morning, they start heading back to where it is that they bed down at night. And now with the males, the big adult males, the hunters, they got a pretty neat thing going on. What they do is you can tell when they're around, because it's the only time I ever hear coyotes, is when they're here. And each one of the males seems to travel with, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 coyotes. And they use them like a shepherd would use dogs, and they keep running the deer herds around in one big circle so that they can maintain a food supply and that they can maintain the same place to live. So the males usually are gone for about 3 days at a shot, and then they're around for about 3 days. And it seems like they're running all these deer herds around the big circle. Now, I've only ever seen this once, and it was in the fall. I just happened to look at the right time, and I seen about 20 deer running past along the hillside past my pond, and then there was a bunch of coyotes behind them, and there were 3 male squatch running. And they were herding the deer. Now, I've only ever seen that happen once. And it was kind of probably just dumb luck, but they were actually doing it in the daytime. And instead of at night for whatever reason, I don't know, because it seems like for the most part those males are pretty reclusive and like to stay more deep woods and not be seen too often, because I haven't hardly seen the big males very often at all.
Now, you told me you feel like the females pretty much run the show, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, the alpha female, she seems to be in charge of the family. What she says goes, because now from what I can tell, it took me a couple years to figure out how many of them there were. It took me, by listening to the calls and whatnot, that there's 6 adult males that are the hunters. Then there's a male that's, he's about 10 feet tall. And then there's little Andy, who's now about 8.5 feet tall. And those 2 act as sentries and kind of like guards over the females and little ones. And there's 3 adult females, and then there's a young female that's, I don't know, I'm guessing she's probably like a 12-year-old or something, because she's significantly smaller than the other females. But there's only 4 females to the group. And then there's another younger male who's probably, maybe a hair bigger than an adult chimpanzee, but he's built like a gorilla. But he's about the size of the adult chimpanzee. Then I would guess that there could be maybe 2 littler ones than that. They don't let me see their babies, and the females, I don't get to see them too often. I used to spotlight them, but as bright as their eyes glow, I figure that hurts their eyes. So I quit doing that, because, I didn't want to make them mad. Now, there's one time, I've got this one other family lives on my road, and they go to bed really early. So, usually about the time it's dark, they're in bed. Anyway, it was probably 10:30 at night, I would guess. And over near where my property and theirs come together, the guy's got a car trailer and a camper and an old car that I don't know if he was going to use it for a demolition derby, maybe, because he likes to run them. Well, I was hearing this kind of banging tin noise that shouldn't be. So like a good neighbor, I figured, I'll go check it out. So I grabbed my 357 Magnum and my flashlight, and I figured I'll go down and check it out. I don't know if somebody's out trying to steal gas out of that old car or what. But I went by there, and I shined the light, and didn't see nothing. Drove down to the neighbors, and I kind of backed in their driveway so I wouldn't shine my lights right in their house, and turned around, and I'm coming back. As I get by this clearing, I shine the spotlight out, and right in the middle of the clearing, there he is. It was a big adult male.
Oh, wow.
And I stopped, and there was kind of a lot of dust. Now, at first I wasn't sure what I was looking at, because you expect the big males, you expect them to be standing upright on 2 legs. Well, he wasn't. He was on all 4s. And he was huge. He was every bit as big as a bull, but a lot taller. And he looked like a black caveman-looking thing, giant caveman, because he just covered in black hair, real muscular. His arms were as big around as me, and he had this big, thick mop of hair on his head and kind of a beard, and just big, powerful, muscular, like the Hulk. It'd be a pretty good description of how muscular he was. And he just froze. And you could see his eyes glowing bright green. And, well, once I figured out what I was looking at, I thought, well, laid the pistol on the seat, that ain't going to do me any good. And I shined the spotlight down a little further so I could still see him, but it wasn't, blinding. And I tried to talk to him. I didn't know how much he'd understand or not. But he looked kind of nervous, and I'm thinking, oh, God, I hope he doesn't show any aggression. Because he looked big enough to just pick up my whole pickup and throw it. And because he kind of looked nervous, he'd look at me, and then he'd look ahead. And I just kind of said to him, in a calm voice, I said, can we be friends? I said, I won't hurt you. I won't hurt your family. And I just want to be able to get along and not have to hurt each other. And he nervously, he'd look at me, and then he'd look ahead, looked at me again, looked ahead, and then just, you never saw such grace. I mean, he went forward towards where there was a break in the fence line. Like, he knew he was king of the forest and didn't have to fear anything. And it was just, I mean, you see something like that, you're just awestruck. You about got your mouth hanging open because you're looking at it like, wow. Well, he came from, and then he was on my property somewhere, and I pulled forward a little, and I couldn't see him anymore. He was just gone into the night. I wasn't very far away from where my house is, so when I pulled up to the house, I just pulled the truck up in the yard right up close to the porch and came inside. I'm just glad he didn't show any sign of aggression at all, which, seems to be kind of normal for them unless you provoke them.
Now, you were telling me you haven't had really any, I guess, aggressive encounters with the ones living on your property?
Not really. Closest thing I had to that is, in the beginning, one time I was out on my front porch, and I got hit with the infrasound that they can do. Now, to people that don't know what the infrasound is sound in a range that we can't hear. And they can do a lot of different stuff with it, and that sound can just give you that freaked out, I don't want to be here kind of feeling. Other people, like when the researchers were here, when Andy was here, he got hit with it, and he just about did a nosedive into the road because it almost knocked him unconscious. I've been told they can kill with it too. They can use it like to paralyze game, so they could just go out and grab it. Now, I don't know. I think this might be some kind of throwback from when the megafauna was around. Because a lot of the megafauna that are now extinct, for example, like mammoths and stuff, probably use the same low-frequency infrasound. And the way they seem to mimic all kinds of stuff, well, maybe they developed something there. I don't know for sure. That's just a guess. Just like a lot of what has to do with them is guesswork. We just don't know because we don't speak the same language. We could sit there and have a long conversation with them. I'm sure we'd find out. That's just not the way it works. But now when I got hit with that infrasound, it was not pleasant. I mean, it made me physically shudder. And then I'm not going to say there was a telepathic component to it, but there could have been. Because to me, it just felt like a flood of emotions hit me. It was like anger and fear and hatred and doom all rolled into one and directed at me. And like I say, it made me shudder. I got hit with that twice, and I thought, well, that's enough of that. I come in the house, and it seems like, from what I can tell, from being around them a lot, is they feel that they allow us the day to do our thing, and then when it's nighttime, that we should be in our homes and let them do what they do. I think that I get the feeling that that's how they feel about things. Now, I did have one other encounter where I got growled at by one. It was in my barn. But he felt trapped, so I don't really blame him.
Can you elaborate on that incident?
Well, when that happened, I had been taking a snack out, going to leave for the girls. And on my barn, there's like 3 bays of it that face south, and then there's like another lean-to coming off the north side where the opening faces west. And where I leave the food for them is now on top of a post right out there that I've got set up. That way I could see from the house in the daytime if they took whatever I left for them. But as I was walking by there, I heard this kind of, and it was from about, it was up close to the ceiling. Now, there wasn't only but one thing that it could have been, at about 10 feet off the ground or so. And it was a big male, and he felt trapped because it had one of them sliding doors that was open, and I was in front of the only clear exit. It was one of them like, oh geez moments. You gotta think fast. So, I did the only thing that I could think of to defuse the situation. I turned my back to him. I figured, hope for the best. Because by turning my back to him, it told him that I trusted him. It took away the threat of me trying to block him in and make him feel trapped. And it also let him know I didn't care he was in my barn. So I put the food out where I did and just kind of pretended like he wasn't there and turned around and headed back towards the house. And once I got past it open, I walked a little faster than I usually do, but
I bet you did.
I didn't show him fear, because I think that only emboldens them to act more aggressively. And I removed myself as what he perceived to be a threat. And everything was cool. And that's the only time, other than one other time that I've gotten hit with infrasound, that I've ever felt threatened.
Well, let me go back here for a moment, and I should have stopped you, and I apologize. You were talking about you saw them hunting. Have you ever heard of anyone else saying they had seen them use the coyotes and that technique before?
Not really. But now, when I had a buddy from Pennsylvania, I used to live out there for a couple of years, and my old fishing buddy come visit. Now, he's an ex-Marine, so, he's a tough guy. And he was out here. We could hear them this one night, and they were positioned with such, military-type strategy about it, that it was unreal. They were all within a quarter mile, and it's just like if the lines that you got when you slice the pie into 6 pieces, they were all evenly spaced like that. And you'd hear the howl of the male coyote, or the male squatch, and you'd hear the coyotes go off. And they'd all go off, each group one at a time. And it was just like, they were all positioned just like slices from a pie, the lines. It was unreal. My friend, he got pretty nervous. He was talking about how many coyotes I had and how that just wasn't natural. He was saying, well, if I had that many coyotes, I'd be shooting someone. I said, I ain't gonna shoot none of them coyotes. I said, it'd be like killing their dogs. I don't want them to kill my dogs. So I ain't gonna mess with them coyotes. But it was just quite interesting hearing them and just the way they were so precisely positioned. was just unreal. Now, when people think that they're an ape of some kind, no, not even close. They're highly intelligent. And I think just because they don't use technology does not mean they're stupid. Not in the least bit. They're smart enough to avoid us. I'd say that makes them pretty darn smart. You know, it's just, they really don't have a need for technology. What do they need that their environment doesn't provide for them? I mean, when you think about them, they're like, well, I consider them pretty much a true man of nature who's perfectly suited to his environment. Unlike us who are hairless and naked and got to cover up with clothes or furs or whatever, they don't. They just work with their environment. And I also don't think that they need to eat near as much as people want to estimate. Since they are covered in hair like they are, it gives them a bunch of insulation. And I also think that their method of walking, which is somewhat different than ours, is probably more efficient too, and they don't burn up as much energy as people would think they would. You know, they're going to take a stride at least twice ours, so they're not going to have to burn up near the energy that people estimate that they would. So I don't think they need to take near as much food out of an area as a lot of people are guessing that they do to survive. I think there's also a lot of overlooked food sources too that they're taking that people don't realize. I think they eat a lot of fungus, because I can't find any morel mushrooms on my property at all. And I've looked, and where they should grow, I don't find none. Not a single one. I think they're getting them. And, you know, they get a lot of stuff around here. Like, I've got some peach trees. I never get any of them. Right about the time they get ripe, they get them all. Then the wild plums, they get them. I've got quite a few wild black raspberries growing on the property, and I'm sure the grays need a lot of them because, they're good. My mulberry tree, I've got kind of back by the shed. Now, one time I was going to mow the lawn, and before I was going to do it, I thought, well, those mulberries are about ripe. I better get back there and have me some of them. They'd be pretty good right about now before I go mow. And I go back to the tree, and I look at it. And it was like you drew a line across the tree at about 12 foot high. At 12 foot, below the 12-foot mark, any berry with any color was gone. Above that, there's ripe berries all over the place. So it's like, well, it wasn't birds did that. And I just kind of laughed and thought, well, somebody got some purple lips. I mean, what are you going to do? They like them too, I guess.
Well,
you like tomatoes. I haven't been able to keep tomatoes. I plant tomatoes. Well, like this year, I put in 20 plants. Haven't gotten any tomatoes off them yet. Last year, I had a dozen plants. I did not get one tomato off them because they swiped them all. The year before that, I took like a little kid swimming pool, put my dirt in there, and then used that like a planter, and then put 8 tomato plants in there with them little cherry tomatoes. I only got 3 out of there the whole season out of 8 plants. They hit everything. I have had them try coming in the house a couple times, which some people would be pretty scary, but one time I remember it was during the day, it was the afternoon, something forced open my basement door. Now, my basement door is one of those Z-bar doors. You know what those are? It's pretty much a bunch of flat boards, and then the boards on the inside form like a Z shape where all the nails are in there to make it into a door, hold it together. I had that propped with I had a 2x10 that was up against that top part of the Z too, and that thing was forced open. Well, of course, when that happened, the dogs went ballistic, and I grabbed the shotgun And I went out the front door, and I went around to the garage, come up to the house, couldn't find nothing. I don't think it could have been a person that did it, but it forced that door open, broke the door, tore it loose, tore the whole frame loose. Now, why it decided it wanted to come in the house, I have no idea. But that's happened twice. And then 2 summers ago, doorknob to my kitchen door was all bent up to where I couldn't get the door open. I had to take the screws out on the inside and take the knob apart in order to get my door open. And then before I had gotten a replacement doorknob from Lumberyard, one night my buddy Ralph sitting at the computer, and he hears the kitchen door pop. And he looks over, and he sees a black finger reach through the doorknob hole and pull the door back shut. I think it was little Andy up on the porch stealing the kitties' food. But, I mean, it was just all kind of crazy stuff I have happen. Like before I realized they were here, one time it was deer season. There were a couple deer on the ridge to the east of my house, and I just opened up the door crack and I shot one. Well, it wasn't shot quite as good as I wanted it to be, and it run off. So I got my shoes on, went out, went to where it was, and began following the blood trail. And I don't know, I went probably a couple 100 yards through the woods. And there was a big circular, stirred-up pattern on the forest floor, and the blood trail quit there, and I couldn't pick it up again. I looked and I looked. I did, like a tracker would, where you start at that spot and spiral out looking for, the blood, like you changed course or something. I couldn't find nothing anywhere. I mean, it was blood trail stopped, the deer was gone, that was just that. And I was kind of upset because you kind of hate to think that it went to waste. Hate to waste meat like that. But I think now that a Bigfoot got to it before I did, probably broke the deer's neck, threw it over his shoulder, took a big leap and a couple more and was gone. And by the time I got there wasn't nothing to find. And there was another time I had a deer hanging in the tree back by the barn. I had it hanging by its neck because I had taken the 2 hindquarters in and cut them up, packaged them, and one front leg was destroyed from my shot because the deer was on the run. And I was going to go out and get some more deer off of that, and the loins were completely torn out of this thing, which I found to be really weird. Because it was up pretty high, too. I was going to have to lower it down to cut the loins out of it. And it didn't seem like it was a coyote could have done it, but the loins were ripped completely out of it.
Oh.
So all I had left was one front leg.
Now, I know you, which, don't worry everyone, we're going to get to I'm telling you, thankfully Dave has agreed to talk as long as I'll let him talk, and we will get to the audio. I'm trying to pull it up now. But while I'm trying to get this up, Dave, could you tell some of the listeners some of the very funny stories you were telling me about Andy?
Well, now recently here, he's been a naughty little boy. My roommate, Ralph, he's got a machete that he likes to chop brush and tall weeds around here with. Well, little Andy, he sees this and he likes to imitate Ralph. And he messes with Ralph. Now, Ralph will be out doing yard work or something, and he gets picked off by pebbles all the time. A while back here, I got my truck stuck, and Ralph went down there, and he was kind of digging around behind the wheels. And pretty soon, something comes zinging out of the woods near him, and it's getting towards dark. And then he's hearing some limbs snapping, because they're wanting him to go back to the house. Pretty soon, here comes a metal spring, like one of the ones you'd find on a box spring mattress. Picks him off right in the crack of his butt. He goes, ow!
Oh.
He hears a giggle come from the woods. This was probably little Andy messing with him. Well, he decided, okay, I'm done digging. I'll go up to the house. And there's been a lot of other times where stuff like that happens. But now, about a month ago, we'd gone grocery shopping. And we got a whole bunch of stuff because we usually only go to town about once a week. And anyway, this was when we bought quite a bit of stuff. So we both carried stuff in, and I was putting stuff away, and Ralph was hauling stuff in. And we're putting all kinds of stuff away, and Ralph kind of set the milk off to the side because he was grabbing other stuff, trying to get as big a loads as he could. And, you know, this was like the day after, and I said, Ralph? He goes, what? I said, we bought milk, didn't we? And he goes, yeah, I remember we bought milk, and he even looked on the grocery list. And, yeah, we bought milk. And I said, okay, well, then where is it? I said, it's not in the fridge. And I looked in the freezers to see if maybe it got put in there. I looked in the cupboards just to make sure, and it wasn't there. And he went back out and looked around at the pickup and all around it, and it was just gone. So from what we could tell is in between him hauling stuff in, little Andy must have come by and swiped that gallon of milk off the tailgate of the pickup. Well, what are you going to do? Yeah, we just kind of laughed about it because we knew we had the milk. We bought it. We put it in the truck. He set it off to the side because I think he was grabbing 12 packs of pop or something, and you know it was just gone. We had no explanation for it. Well, then we noticed that little Andy had gotten a hold of Ralph's machete again. He used it, was chopping off some pretty big vines about half the thickness of a wrist, cut clean with one blow. And the machete was kind of bent up, so I was being good to Ralph, so I took a little time and I straightened it out as best I could. Ralph had it sitting out on the deck, on the table that we got on the deck. And we're out there, and Ralph goes, where's my machete? I said, I don't know. I said, last time I seen it was sitting right there by where you're at. He goes, I know it was. That's where I thought it was, too. So he walks out into the backyard looking around where I've got an area in the backyard fenced in, that's fenced in. And probably 30 feet away, he finds it. It's laying there next to a hickory tree, all bent up again. You can see where he'd been chopping on the hickory tree. And this was in broad daylight. He come up and did that. And I laughed about it, straightened the machete out again. And then Ralph's in his room, like the following day, and he's watching television. And there's the window that's right above his bed. Next thing I know, Ralph comes out of there. He's all excited. I said, what's going on? He goes, I found this snake in my bed. I was watching TV, and there was this snake about a foot away from my head.
Oh, no.
Well, it wasn't poisonous, and it was a pretty rare snake, so I'm glad he didn't kill it. It was, I think they call it a banded snake. I hadn't seen one in probably close to 30 years. They're kind of a steel gray colored, and they got an orange belly on them. And they're kind of rare. Well, Ralph took it outside and let it go, which, you know, since they're kind of probably endangered, is good. It was, you know, not a giant snake, probably about 16 inches, skinnier than a garter snake. You know, no big deal, but still kind of freaks you out when you're not expecting it, and there it is about a foot away from your face.
So was this Andy's payment?
Well, that's kind of what we thought, because on a little further looking, we seen the screen at the window above Ralph's bed. There's this spot, almost looked like a big finger. It poked a hole by the side where he most certainly could have fed the snake through and ended up in bed with Ralph.
Oh my gosh.
And of course we laughed about it. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, he's a naughty little boy. And there's other stuff, like I've left a cigarette lighter out on the table on the deck and it vanished.
What do they think of fire? I mean, I'm sure they know what fire is. I would think they would be afraid of fire.
I don't think they're really afraid of it, but like when we burn trash in the burn barrel, a lot of times they'll come around, like just to keep an eye on it, make sure we don't make a big fire. Because, for example, if we made a big forest fire, I mean, we're going to destroy their home, too. I thought it was interesting that I've had a cigarette lighter stolen.
Did you ever get that back?
No.
Oh, they took that for good.
Now, the one file, I had kind of complained to Ralph, well, I wish we had that file, because that works good for sharpening up, like, axes and, machetes and stuff like that. It'd been gone for like 18 months. The very next day, we seen that, and the deck rail that I stand at, like when I called to the females, right down below there, it was smashed into the ground, and it was there. Now, it was all rusted up and worthless at that point, but it got in return. Now, how did he know to return that? Does he understand perfect English, or was he somehow reading my mind?
Well,
because we didn't see him anywhere, we didn't hear him anywhere, and how would he know what a file was to return it? And the same thing happened with a hatchet that turned up missing. For about 6 months, and I said to Ralph, I said, now what did you do with that hatchet? He goes, oh no. I said, well, I don't know, ain't gonna cut. I said, I've had that hatchet since I was a kid, and I don't know. I don't need it laying out in the woods being lost somewhere because you can't put things back where you got them from. I didn't think that was too unreasonable. You use a tool, put it back where you found it, then we know where to look for it. Instead of just put it back anywhere. Well, couldn't find it. Here the next day, it was over where Ralph had been using it. Now, it couldn't have been there the whole time because he'd have hit the thing with the lawnmower for sure. So it got returned. Now, does he understand English, or is he reading my mind? I don't know. A lot of people think they have telepathic abilities.
Well, Dave, right here, I'm going to stop you because that is a really good question. Folks, we are going to take a quick break, and we will be back in just a moment.